A couple of you have asked how to be successful at creating library or production music.
Now, if I knew the answer to that, I'd be a very rich man. But
Library music is ostensibly a numbers game, and with any numbers game, there's ways of improving your odds. There are three pillars of music for media. Pillar one, the grand duke of media music, is synchronized music. So you've done something that people want off you. It's a #1 hit, or you've been nominated for a Mercury Music Prize. Number two is commissioned music, where the director or producer has an idea of what they want and think you're the right person for the job, hire you to do it. Number three, library or production music. Now, this is where someone can't afford the first two options, has a vague idea roughly of what they're looking for, not entirely sure, and conversely you're composing music and have no idea how it's going to be applied. Basically, the way it works is you write a bunch of music, it sits on albums, and then it gets put under the nose of directors and producers, editors largely, and then basically the hope is that they will pick it up to synchronize, at which point you should get a fee, and then when it's broadcast or exhibited, you'll also get a royalty. Now, the reason we use book libraries, bibliotheques, is it's a place we can go to find specific titles. We can search by kind of subject matter. I want to find out about French wine. Or indeed, because of the choice available, we can browse for something that takes our fancy. But the advantage of a library over a bookshop is we don't have to buy the books, we just borrow them. And whilst to the end user there may appear to be a sophisticated kind of library type affair, to us, monetarily, they behave more like one of these. Colouring, sugar, and a whole heap load of hoof. But I'm being abstract. The question is how to get ahead in library or production music, as it's called in the States. And why would I offer myself up as an authority? Well, I've achieved a lot in my career, but by far the greatest monetary reward I've ever received is for library music. It's a numbers game. So here's 10 simple rules from me that I think will give you better odds. By far the single most important decision to make, because not all library companies are created equal. And when you research this further, you'll find that a few companies hold a huge dominance, huge market share. Now, there are a lot of younger companies springing up, but these companies are in growth stage. And you have to understand from a business point of view, what they're investing in is the IP, what they're investing in is the market share, but what they're not investing in is ways to make you guys money. And I know what your first question will be. Now, I'm a little bit out of touch, but I believe the big companies are EMI, Universal, but also the amazing success of Extreme and Audio Network needs to be looked at. Put frankly, you have to write shitloads of the stuff. Now, if you think you're going to nurture a career as a theatre composer, whilst maybe secreting a single polished ruby into the raspberry chews in the hope that they will find it, you're sadly mistaken. The way it works is you need to saturate the marketplace with your material so that editors find you. And when editors find your stuff and like your stuff, then they will search for more of your stuff. So it's not only about saturating the marketplace to be discovered, it's also sating the needs of the new fans that you make within the editing fraternity. And that's why carving out a living from library music is a full-time exercise. You know, you can't hedge your bets between a bit of theatre music, a bit of kind of live dance, some games music, I'm going to chuck some library music out there. It doesn't work that way. These are each-way bets. When they come in, you'll earn less. Now, what you need to do is bet on more horses to win, and hopefully one of those wins will actually be a unicorn. And when I say unicorn, I mean a track that changes your life. If you speak to successful library composers, they all have their one unicorn, that track that went fucking global. No, there's no space for that here. This is not your interesting Jazz Odyssey third album, and it's a mistake I made repeatedly with library music. If you want to be creative, go off and make some albums all by yourself. This needs to have a broad appeal. It would be like, you know, you've got your Smarties in this trough, you've got your Jelly Bellies, you've got your Raspberry Sours, and you're creating little mini burritos stuffed with foie gras with a couple of little pomegranate seeds on top. It just simply isn't appropriate. You know, going back to the horse racing analogy, analogy. It's like not putting your money on horses to win, putting them on a bunch of kangaroos. Fun to watch, but it's a horse race. The one thing I have noticed, however, about production and library music is that I feel that the 80-20 rule is applied quite a lot. Now, this is a business philosophy that states that 80% of your objectives can be achieved in 20% of the time. So for me, library and production music often just doesn't sound like the stuff you hear on radio, like the stuff you hear on films and TV. I think you need to spend a little bit more than 20%. My parents are both actors, and I spent a large proportion of my childhood in voiceover studios. And the thing I found most fascinating was when they had to select some library music, and the engineer would basically get this record out, whack it on the platter, and he'd get the stylus, and he'd literally go bonk, 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 until the client went, hang on a minute, go back to that one with the thing. And that's what the hook is, the thing that identifies your track and hooks them. It doesn't have to be a melodic one, it can just be a sound or a concept. It's quite interesting, my most successful library tracks all feature vocals, but I made the real money off the instrumental versions, but I think it was the vocals that hooked people in. I did a track with the dial-up sound of the internet, you know, whether it be a raspberry, something like that, it's just a thing. I think the current thinking is that you kind of state the hook very, very quickly, and then you go down to a 3-act structure, your first subject, your second subject, and then a big climax with a little hooky epilogue at the end. Library and production music is still a domain of media composers largely, and I think that when we're not working to picture or to dialogue, we tend to overcomplicate. If you listen to the real deal on the radio, it's almost arrogantly simple. And I think if you listen to my examples below, my more successful library tracks, they tend to be the thing, and then a very simple backing. But also within the structure of those tracks, there's lots of space. So the thing happens, and then there's rumble, 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 underscore, underscore, and then we go back to the thing. I think it's safe to say that most library and production music has a shelf life, and this is a question that's kind of down to you. Do you want to shorten that shelf life by hitting the zeitgeist, but conversely also maybe creating a real burst of usage on that track and really hit the nail on the head? Certainly my most successful track was a kind of callous rip-off, not of a particular tune, but of a certain artist's output, and he was kind of gold dust for a couple of years, and we rode on the coattails of that. If you listen to example A, this is my third most successful library track, and I don't know, it's not really zeitgeisty trendy, it's more kind of in the use of that type of music. That was kind of bang on the zeitgeist for rom-coms, Made in Manhattan, Scent of a Woman, Hitch, that kind of thing. And then that kind of spirit went out of, you know, the film industry. So the shelf life of that track was very short, whereas the shelf life of example B is, well, it's music from no time. It's like that music was never fashionable, what even is it? But it has a thing, it has a hook, you know, the vocal thing is something that people clearly grab onto, and then it has acres and acres and pounds of fat of underscore that kind of changes subtly so people can use it effectively, and it is still being used to this day. So you've backed your unicorn and she's come in, but you only put 50 pence on her. This is a key part of making a success library music, and it's difficult to have the look ahead to get this right, because the rights issue is a bit of a kind of nuanced minefield. Basic rule is the more you take up front, the less you'll get at the other end. So take as little as you can afford. A good deal is 50% of your publishing. They'll usually take that, and they can't take any more by law in the UK, and 50% mechanicals. But there will be all sorts of kind of nuanced recoupment, non-recoupment deals, giving you cash up front, possibly reducing the mechanicals, and some companies don't even offer mechanicals. My unicorn was 100% earned through mechanical royalties, not through PRS or publishing royalties. The other thing I would recommend is this is not the time to form a collaborative of, say, 8 writers and do all of this stuff together. The more you divide up the pie is ostensibly the less money you're putting on your unicorn. On a technical note, make sure, thanks mate, you stem the shit out of your tracks. This will give your tracks the best chance of being used on a variety of applications and to being used repeatedly on maybe similar or connected productions. What I tend to do is try and do not just loads of stems, almost to the point of multi-tracks. I also do alternative versions. So recently I did a library album which was very fairy tale-ish, and I did Slavic and Gallic versions of the different compositions. The more you give them, the more they have to work with. I can't stress enough how crucial this is to a successful library track. You need to give your end user a modicum of indication of what your track is about, what it contains, what it can be applied to. I know a legendary kind of library giant who told me that his biggest track by a country mile is called Low Subby Drone. If you look at the exhibits below, Manhattan Fairy Tale, almost oxymoronic, but it implies joyous playfulness combined with something that's likely to be urbane and modern. Pleasure Zone, well, the zone bit for me implies that it's going to be slightly edgy, will have a beat maybe, and pleasure a degree of eroticism. So cast away your ego, cast away any artistic notions where titling is concerned, and just describe what it is or what you can use it for. The final piece of the library puzzle is possibly the most crucial, your track listing. Your tracks go onto virtual albums. Editors like big libraries because there's lots of choice, but what they like is choice of albums, not necessarily titles within it. So if they're onto kind of track 3 or 4, as they pop through the different titles, they'll probably think this album isn't really for me and switch. So as a consequence, I would say 70% of my income from library music is from track number 1s, 25% from track number 2s, 3% from track number 3s, and then it tails off instantly into fractions of percentage points. So it's crucial to get there as number 1. One of the ideas that I've had over the years is when I share albums with other composers, we agree to split all of the tracks 50-50, basically because we understand, regardless of the quality of composition, we know that track number 1 is going to be the one that earns 70% of the total income of an album. So what are my conclusions? Well, I have a lot of people asking me about library music, as in I'm kind of thinking of dabbling in that, or I wanted to do a bit of that, tide me over until the media composition career takes off. And I have to say, when you go into any area of the business, you're going to be up against people who aren't dabbling, who aren't just kind of tiding themselves over until another part of their career takes off. So, as with anything, and the more I think about this, the more, this kind of laser approach is what I recommend. In fact, I refer to it as blitzkrieg. So this is your industry front line with your library music, your pop, your prizes, TV, film, I always forget games, and a lot of people just use their kind of hedgehog forces across the entire line. Now, I believe the concept of blitzkrieg is to focus all of your forces just on one small part of that line, so you can burst through and encircle your foes. And this is the way it kind of lined up in my career. So how has library worked out for me? Well, this is my earnings landscape. Dollar up the x-axis, years on the y, just from library music. Now, I started writing library music in '97, and you'll see for the first 3 years, my earnings were negligible. And then suddenly they started coming in 2001, and there was a huge spike in 2012. I'm currently earning roughly 1% of what I was 6 years ago. Most of these earnings were from me contributing to around 30 albums, but there was this huge unicorn track that really took it to a different level. The reason I focused on library music and dominated for a very short while is because, to be honest, I couldn't get arrested as a media composer. When I joined the library brigade, I was warned that the previous generation had been able to buy mansion houses in Hampstead, our equivalent of the Hollywood Hills. I kind of stretched to a small terraced house in East Dulwich, maybe the equivalent to Culver City. I put some seed funding into Spitfire Audio, and through library, I met Rupert Gregson-Williams, who introduced me to Harry, from which my career began. So literally owe everything to library music. Are those figures earnable these days? Well, to be frank, I'm not quite sure. I suspect, like all areas of the industry, it has become stratified. But I maintain that if you have a laser focus, if you aim to dominate a part of the business, then it's likely you will succeed. It's not about hedging your bets, it's about betting on that unicorn.